I will serve him. Why is everyone here called a guest, yet treated so differently? The restaurant fell quiet for a moment. The biker had been standing at the entrance for almost a full minute. No greeting, no menu, no eye contact, just silence and judgment. One server smirked. We don't serve gas station customers here. Another added, maybe he's looking for the bar down the street. A couple near the window whispered loud enough to be heard. Places lose class when they forget standards. Daniel Mercer, the manager, folded his arms. Nina, we are a fine dining establishment. Image matters. Nina did not move from the entrance. He walked in like everyone else, she said calmly. He didn't cause trouble. He didn't disrespect anyone. Yet everyone already decided who he is. One coworker scoffed. Look at him, Nina replied quietly. I am. I see a customer. Daniel's tone sharpened. Customers represent the brand, and the brand represents how we treat people, Nina answered. The biker remained silent, observing. A younger waiter muttered, people pay good money to feel comfortable. Nina turned slightly. Comfort should never require someone else to be humiliated. Daniel stepped closer. Seat him near the restroom. Quickly. No, Nina said gently. That single word created tension sharper than raised voices. Excuse me? Daniel asked. He deserves the same seat as anyone else. A guest at table 12 leaned back in his chair, listening closely. Daniel lowered his voice. Do not make this complicated. It is already complicated, Nina replied. Because everyone here is called a guest, but only some are treated like one. Silence spread across the dining room. The biker finally spoke. I don't want to cause problems. You're not, Nina said. She picked up 2 menus. Good evening, sir. Welcome to Hudson Prime.
Right this way,
she
sir.
guided him past
We
the
have a
stairs,
lovely table
past
by
the
the window
quiet
for you
judgment,
tonight.
and seated him
Look
near
at
the
that
window.
jacket.
One waitress whispered, unbelievable. Another chuckled, hope he can afford water. Nina ignored them. Coffee? She asked. Yes. Daniel approached again. That table is reserved. It was empty. Daniel's patience thinned. Guests expect a certain standard. Nina placed the coffee cup in front of the biker. Respect is the standard. One server muttered behind her. Why treat him like he owns the place? Nina answered without turning around. Because dignity shouldn't depend on who owns the place. The biker studied her closely now. Not her uniform, not her appearance. Her courage. Busy night, he said. Yes, Nina replied. People come here to feel valued. He nodded slowly. And some people reveal their value, he said quietly, when no one is watching. Across the dining room, Daniel watched carefully, already regretting allowing the situation to continue. Daniel Mercer decided he had seen enough. From the far side of the dining room, he watched Nina place the steak in front of the biker with the same care she showed every other guest. That single detail irritated him more than the man's appearance. To Daniel, service was not simply about politeness. It was about maintaining hierarchy, order, predictability. Tonight, Nina was disrupting all three. He walked across the restaurant with controlled urgency, but the tension in his posture was impossible to hide. Nina, he said sharply, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. A word, now. I'm currently serving a guest, Nina replied calmly. That will be handled by someone else. I started the table, she said. I'll finish the table. Daniel's jaw tightened. Several guests pretended not to listen, but their attention had already shifted. I gave you instructions, Daniel said, his voice rising slightly. This is not a debate. Nina kept her composure. He has done nothing wrong. Daniel leaned closer, lowering his voice but not his anger. This establishment has standards. So does basic decency, Nina answered quietly. That was the moment Daniel lost patience. You are embarrassing this restaurant, he snapped loudly, his voice cutting through the soft jazz music. Several conversations stopped entirely. He is a guest, Nina replied, just like everyone else. He is not like everyone else, Daniel barked. Nina's eyes did not waver. That's exactly the problem. A nervous tension spread across the dining room. Some guests looked uncomfortable. Others leaned back slightly, sensing the situation escalating beyond normal service disputes. Daniel's face reddened. You will step away from this table immediately, he shouted. No. The single word landed heavier than any argument. Daniel reached for Nina's arm, intending to pull her away from the table. Enough, he snapped. The movement was abrupt. Nina lost her balance when Daniel pushed her aside in frustration. She stumbled backward, her shoulder striking the edge of a nearby chair before she fell to the floor. Gasps spread across the room. If this moment moved you, tell us where you are watching from and share your thoughts in the comments. Do you believe dignity should ever depend on appearance? Like this video if you stand for fairness, and subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories that remind us justice still begins with ordinary courage. A wine glass trembled in someone's hand. A chair scraped sharply against the hardwood floor. Before anyone else could react, the biker stood. The movement was fast but controlled. He stepped forward and extended his hand toward Nina. "Easy," he said quietly. Nina looked momentarily surprised as he helped her back to her feet. "I'm okay," she said softly. But the biker did not release his attention from Daniel. The calm expression he had maintained since entering the restaurant had disappeared. In its place was something colder, sharper. "You don't push people who are doing their job," he said firmly. Daniel straightened his jacket defensively. "You don't tell me how to run my restaurant," he snapped. The biker took one step forward. "You call this leadership?" The question was not loud, yet the tone behind it silenced the room. Daniel scoffed, attempting to regain control of the situation. "You walk in here dressed like that, disrupt my staff, and expect special treatment?" "I expect basic respect," the biker replied. "You should be grateful you weren't turned away at the door," Daniel shot back. The biker's gaze did not move. "You believe dignity is something you give only to certain people." "I believe in protecting standards," Daniel replied angrily. "Standards that allow you to humiliate employees in front of customers?" the biker asked. Daniel laughed bitterly. "You think buying one steak makes you important?" The biker reached calmly into his jacket pocket and removed a phone. The motion was simple, unhurried, intencional. Daniel smirked slightly. "Calling a ride?" The biker ignored the remark and dialed. "Yes," he said quietly into the phone. "I'm at Hudson Prime. I need the regional director here, immediately." Daniel shook his head with open amusement. "You think name-dropping will help?" The biker ended the call and returned the phone to his pocket. "We'll see," he replied calmly. Nina stood silently beside the table, still processing what had just happened. She had never seen a situation escalate so quickly. Guests were no longer pretending not to watch. 5 minutes passed, then 10. The restaurant attempted to return to normal, but the tension remained heavy. Daniel forced a polite smile as he checked on other tables, though his eyes repeatedly shifted toward the entrance. Then the door opened again. 3 black vehicles stopped outside. A woman in her early 60s entered the restaurant with confident urgency. Margaret Collins was known across the company as someone who did not make unnecessary visits. Her eyes moved across the dining room. Then she saw the biker. Her expression changed instantly. She approached quickly, stopping directly in front of him. "Mr. Romano," she said respectfully. The name spread across the room like electricity. Daniel's face drained of color. Margaret turned toward him slowly. "Do you understand who you are speaking to?" Daniel blinked. I wasn't informed." Margaret's tone sharpened. "This is Lucas Romano, the founder, the owner, the man whose company had quietly acquired Hudson Prime 3 years earlier." Daniel's lips parted slightly, but no words came out. Lucas Romano looked at Nina briefly, then back at Daniel. "I entered your restaurant as a guest," Lucas said calmly. "I was ignored, mocked, and I just watched you push one of your own employees to the floor for showing basic human decency." Daniel attempted to speak. Lucas raised his hand slightly. "You didn't fail tonight because of poor service," Lucas continued. "You failed because you forgot what service means." Silence filled the room. Margaret spoke firmly. "Mr. Mercer, we need to discuss your position immediately." Daniel's confidence collapsed under the weight of realization. Lucas turned toward Nina. "You asked an important question earlier," he said quietly. Nina remained speechless. Lucas continued. "Why are some guests treated differently than others?" He paused. A business reveals its true character in moments like this. Several guests lowered their eyes, because they understood. They had witnessed something more than conflict. They had witnessed truth, and truth had just changed everything. Silence remained in Hudson Prime long after Lucas Romano's name had been spoken. The quiet was not the comfortable kind the restaurant was known for. It was heavier, filled with realization. People who had spent decades believing they could read a person in seconds were now forced to reconsider how easily they had judged wrong. Daniel Mercer stood frozen, his confidence dissolving beneath the weight of exposure. Only minutes earlier, he had been certain of his authority, certain of the invisible hierarchy he believed defined the room. Now, the same room watched him with a mixture of discomfort and quiet disappointment. Margaret Collins did not raise her voice. She did not need to. Her presence alone carried the authority of someone who had built her career long before many of the younger staff had entered the workforce. "Mr. Mercer," she said calmly, "please step aside." Daniel swallowed hard, attempting to recover some composure. "There must be a misunderstanding," he said quickly. "I was protecting the image of the restaurant." Lucas Romano remained standing beside Nina, his posture relaxed yet commanding. "The image of a business," Lucas said quietly, "is created by how it treats people when it believes no one important is watching." Daniel hesitated. "I was maintaining standards." Lucas studied him carefully. "No," he replied. "You were maintaining assumptions." The distinction hung in the air. Several guests shifted in their seats, uncomfortable not because of conflict, but because of recognition. Many of them had built careers, managing people, leading teams, teaching younger generations the value of discipline and professionalism. Yet even experience did not always protect against blind spots. Margaret gestured toward a quiet corner near the entrance. "We will continue this conversation privately," she told Daniel. Daniel nodded stiffly and followed her, aware that every step felt heavier than the last. The dining room remained unusually quiet. Lucas turned toward Nina. "Are you hurt?" he asked. "I'm fine," she replied, though her hands still carried faint tension from the sudden fall. "You handled yourself well. I just did my job." Lucas considered that answer. "No," he said gently. "You protected something most people forget under pressure." Nina did not immediately respond. She had never expected the quiet biker she defended to become the most powerful person connected to the restaurant. The realization did not change her posture or her tone, but it did shift the weight of the moment. "I didn't know who you were," she said honestly. "That is exactly why your decision mattered," Lucas replied. At a nearby table, the older gentleman who had observed earlier spoke quietly to his wife. "That young woman has integrity." His wife nodded slowly. "Integrity is rare," she said. Lucas glanced around the dining room, noticing the guests who now avoided eye contact. People often felt uncomfortable when confronted with their own silence during moments that required courage. One man adjusted his cufflinks unnecessarily. Another pretended to reread the menu he had already memorized. Lucas spoke calmly, though his voice carried easily across the quiet room. "A business does not fail when mistakes are made," he said. "It fails when people believe they are entitled to treat others without dignity." Several employees lowered their eyes. One of the younger servers who had earlier suggested calling Nina stood quietly, unsure whether to continue working or remain present. Lucas noticed her uncertainty. "Please," he said gently, gesturing toward the chair across from him. "Sit for a moment." "That wouldn't be appropriate," Nina replied. "It is," Lucas said, "because tonight, you are the only person here who understood the meaning of hospitality." She hesitated briefly before sitting. "I was taught that respect is not something you give selectively," she said. "Who taught you that?" Lucas asked. "My father." Lucas nodded slightly. "People who teach lessons like that rarely receive enough credit." "He didn't expect credit," Nina said softly. "He believed doing the right thing should feel normal." Lucas allowed a faint smile. "Your father was a wise man." Across the dining room, Margaret returned alone. Daniel was no longer visible. The absence communicated the outcome clearly. Margaret approached Lucas respectfully. "We will handle the transition immediately," she said quietly. Lucas nodded once. "This is not about punishment," he replied. "It is about correction." Margaret understood. She turned toward the staff. "Everyone," she said calmly, "service continues as normal." The statement carried reassurance but also expectation. Normal now meant something different than it had 1 hour earlier. Nina stood. "I should return to work." Lucas nodded. "Yes," he said, "because consistency matters." As Nina resumed her duties, something subtle had changed in the way others moved. One server who had earlier whispered criticism now greeted guests more attentively. Another offered water more quickly than necessary. People adjusted behavior when reminded they were being observed not only by management, but by conscience. Lucas finished his coffee slowly, no longer in a hurry. When Nina returned with the check presenter, she placed it gently on the table. Whenever you're ready, she said. Lucas did not immediately reach for it. Instead, he looked at her thoughtfully. Tell me something, he said. Yes? If you had known who I was when I walked in, would you have treated me differently? Nina considered the question carefully. No, she answered. Why not? Because respect should not depend on risk. Lucas nodded slowly. That answer, he said, is why businesses survive generations. Nina offered a small, polite smile. I hope so. Lucas stood and placed the signed receipt on the table. Thank you, Nina. You're welcome, sir. He paused briefly. Please don't call me sir. She hesitated. What should I call you? Lucas is fine. She nodded once. Have a good evening, Lucas. As he walked toward the entrance, several guests subtly acknowledged him with respectful nods, not because of wealth, not because of power. Because truth, once revealed, often commands a different kind of respect. Before leaving, Lucas turned once more toward the dining room. Kindness is not weakness, he said calmly. It is discipline. Then he stepped into the cool Manhattan night. Inside Hudson Prime, service continued. But the definition of standards had changed. The next morning, Hudson Prime felt different before the doors even opened. News traveled quickly in industries built on reputation. By 9 a.m., regional management had already arrived, quietly reviewing policies, interviewing staff, and assessing what had allowed the situation to escalate the previous evening. The restaurant itself remained physically unchanged, yet the atmosphere carried a new weight. Every employee sensed that something deeper than a personnel adjustment had occurred. A standard had been tested, and the result had not favored complacency. Nina arrived 15 minutes early, as she always did. Routine gave her stability, something she had learned to value after years of uncertainty caring for her mother. She tied her hair neatly, adjusted her uniform, and reviewed the reservation list without drawing attention to herself. She did not expect special treatment after the previous evening. She had not acted for recognition. She had acted because remaining silent would have felt dishonest. Margaret Collins stood near the office doorway, speaking quietly with the interim floor supervisor. Margaret had worked in hospitality for more than 3 decades. She had seen trends come and go, restaurants rise and fall, but she had learned that culture always mattered more than decor. When Nina approached, Margaret offered a small nod. Good morning, Nina. Good morning. Margaret studied her briefly. How are you feeling? I'm ready to work. Margaret allowed a faint smile. That is the correct answer. The morning meeting began promptly. Staff gathered near the bar area, unsure what tone the conversation would take. Margaret spoke calmly. Last night revealed a weakness in our culture. Not in skill, not in efficiency, in judgment. No one interrupted. A business earns loyalty when guests feel respected, she continued. But it earns longevity when employees understand why respect matters. Several staff members shifted slightly, uncomfortable under the quiet accountability. We are not here simply to serve food, Margaret said. We are here to create an environment where dignity is consistent. One server raised a cautious question. Are we expected to ignore presentation standards? Margaret answered evenly. Presentation matters, but humanity matters more. The distinction was clear. Nina listened without reaction. She did not look toward anyone who had whispered the night before. She did not seek acknowledgement. After the meeting concluded, Margaret approached her privately. Mr. Romano was very clear about one thing, Margaret said. Consistency of values is more important than consistency of appearances. Nina nodded. I understand. Margaret studied her for a moment. He also requested that I personally observe how you work. Nina did not appear nervous. You're welcome to observe. Margaret allowed herself a small smile. I intend to. By noon, the restaurant had returned to normal service rhythm. Business professionals arrived for lunch meetings. Couples shared quiet conversations, and the familiar scent of grilled steak filled the air. Yet employees behaved differently. Water glasses were filled more quickly. Greetings were more sincere. Eye contact lasted longer. The lesson from the previous evening had settled into practice. Shortly after 2 o'clock, the front door opened again. This time, Lucas Romano entered wearing a tailored charcoal coat. Without the biker jacket, he appeared exactly as many would expect the owner of a successful company to appear. Confident. Controlled. Observant. A hostess greeted him immediately. Good afternoon, sir. Lucas nodded politely. Nina is working today? He asked. Yes, she is. Nina noticed him approaching but did not interrupt her current table. Professionalism remained her priority. When she finished, she approached calmly. "Good afternoon." "Good afternoon," Lucas replied. "I hope everything is running smoothly today," she said. "That depends," Lucas answered. "What do you think?" Nina glanced briefly across the dining room. "People seem more aware of each other today." Lucas nodded. Awareness often comes after discomfort. Nina allowed herself a small smile. Discomfort can be useful. Lucas gestured toward an empty table. "May I sit?" "Of course." As she placed a menu before him, he spoke quietly. "You did not ask for anything after last night." "I didn't expect anything. Most people would." "I didn't do anything unusual," Nina replied. Lucas considered her answer carefully. "You reminded people of something simple," he said. "That is often unusual." Nina did not respond immediately. Lucas continued. "I built my company visiting locations unannounced. Not because I enjoy surprises, because people behave differently when they believe status is present." "And yesterday?" Nina asked. "Yesterday," Lucas said, "I saw who understood the meaning of hospitality without needing an audience." Nina remained thoughtful. "My father used to say character shows up when it is inconvenient." Lucas nodded slowly. "He would have been successful in business." "He wasn't in business," Nina said softly. "He was a firefighter." Lucas paused. "That explains a lot." A nearby table signaled for service. Nina excused herself briefly, returning moments later with water for another guest before continuing the conversation. Lucas observed the interaction closely. "You treat everyone the same." "That's the goal. Consistency builds trust," Lucas said. "So does fairness." Lucas leaned back slightly. "I would like you to help Margaret review our service training program." Nina blinked once, surprised. "I'm not a manager." "Not yet," Lucas replied calmly. She hesitated. "I still have a lot to learn." "That is exactly why you are qualified." Nina considered the proposal carefully. "My responsibility is still to perform my current role well." Lucas nodded. "And you are doing that." The lunch crowd continued flowing steadily, yet something about the conversation suggested quiet transition. Lucas stood after finishing his coffee. "Thank you for your time," he said. "You're welcome." He paused briefly. "Yesterday, you asked why people are treated differently." Nina nodded. Lucas continued. "Sometimes the answer reveals more about the observer than the person being judged." Nina absorbed the thought silently. Lucas walked toward the exit, acknowledging staff politely as he passed. Several employees greeted him with genuine respect, not forced politeness. Respect, once understood, rarely needs to be demanded. As the door closed behind him, Nina returned to work. The restaurant looked the same. The menu had not changed. The lighting remained warm, but the standard had shifted. And once standards evolve through truth, they rarely return to what they were before. The change inside Hudson Prime did not happen loudly. It unfolded in small adjustments, in quieter voices, in longer eye contact, in subtle hesitation before judgment. By the middle of the week, the staff had begun to understand that the previous Friday evening had not simply been an isolated incident. It had been a correction. Nina noticed the difference first in the way her coworkers spoke to one another. The same servers who had once exchanged quick sarcasm behind the bar now chose their words more carefully. The younger employees stood straighter when greeting guests. Even the kitchen felt calmer, as if tension had been replaced by a shared awareness that professionalism required more than technical skill. Margaret Collins spent several days quietly observing operations, rarely interrupting, occasionally taking notes. Her experience allowed her to recognize the difference between temporary compliance and genuine change. What she wanted was not fear-based discipline but internal understanding. On Thursday afternoon, she invited Nina to sit with her briefly before the dinner shift began. "I'd like your perspective," Margaret said calmly, sliding a folder across the table. Nina opened it carefully. Inside were pages of training guidelines used across the company's restaurants. Greeting protocols, conflict resolution steps, language recommendations designed to maintain consistency in tone and experience. "These are solid procedures," Nina said after reviewing several pages. "They are," Margaret replied, "but procedures do not guarantee judgment." Nina nodded. Margaret leaned back slightly. "Most training focuses on avoiding mistakes," she continued. "But the real challenge is teaching people why decisions matter." Nina considered the idea. My father used to say that people follow rules when someone is watching, she said quietly. But they follow values when no one is. Margaret allowed a small smile. That is precisely why Lucas wants your involvement. Nina shifted slightly in her chair. I'm still learning. Good, Margaret said. People who believe they have nothing left to learn often stop improving. Later that evening, Hudson Prime filled steadily with the familiar rhythm of reservations and returning guests. The majority of patrons were individuals who appreciated quiet environments and consistent service. Some had been visiting the restaurant for more than a decade. One older couple sat near the window, celebrating their 42nd wedding anniversary. Nina remembered them from previous visits. The husband always ordered the ribeye. The wife preferred salmon, though she often shared bites from his plate. They spoke slowly, comfortably, the ease of long partnership evident in every gesture. Good evening, Nina said warmly. Good evening, Nina, the husband replied, remembering her name. We appreciate how consistent you are, the wife added kindly. Consistency is a compliment in this business, Nina answered. The husband nodded thoughtfully. Consistency builds trust. Moments later, a younger couple entered, clearly unfamiliar with fine dining etiquette. The man hesitated slightly before selecting utensils, glancing subtly at neighboring tables for guidance. Nina approached with gentle reassurance. Take your time, she said. There's no rush here. Gratitude softened the tension in their expressions. Across the room, another server observed quietly, before stepping forward to assist a guest with menu recommendations. The effort felt more genuine than forced, Margaret noticed. Real change rarely needed reminders once understanding took root. Later that evening, Lucas Romano entered once more, this time without attracting attention. He did not request special treatment, nor did he interrupt service. He simply observed. He noticed a small but meaningful detail. A junior employee who had previously suggested calling security now greeted each guest with careful attentiveness, ensuring eye contact and offering assistance without hesitation. Lucas turned slightly toward Margaret. People adjust when they understand the reason behind expectations, he said quietly. Margaret nodded. They adjust permanently when they believe the expectation reflects fairness. Lucas allowed himself a small, approving expression. At the end of the evening, Margaret gathered the staff briefly. I want to share something important, she said calmly. Standards are not meant to exclude people. They exist to ensure consistency of care. Several employees listened closely. A professional environment does not mean a selective environment, she continued. It means predictable dignity. The phrase lingered. Predictable dignity. It captured something many had not previously considered. After the meeting, Nina prepared to leave for the evening. Long shifts required discipline, but she had grown accustomed to balancing responsibility with endurance. Her mother's medical appointments remained her primary priority, and financial stability mattered more than career advancement. As she gathered her belongings, Lucas approached quietly. I hope the week has not been uncomfortable, he said. It has been educational, Nina replied. Lucas nodded. Growth often feels uncomfortable at first. Nina smiled slightly. So does honesty. Lucas considered her answer. You have influenced more people this week than you realize. I didn't try to influence anyone, Nina said. That is why your influence matters, Lucas replied. She hesitated before asking, why do you visit your restaurants without telling anyone? Lucas paused briefly. Because systems often work perfectly on paper, he said. Reality reveals the truth. Nina understood. My father believed emergencies reveal character. Lucas nodded slowly. Business is not so different. As they stepped outside, cool evening air carried the distant hum of city traffic. Lucas spoke again. You asked an important question earlier this week. Yes. Why are people treated differently? Nina looked toward the streetlights reflecting on wet pavement. Sometimes people assume difference means distance. Lucas considered the thought. And sometimes distance prevents understanding. Nina nodded quietly. Lucas extended a simple handshake. Thank you for reminding people what consistency truly means. Nina accepted the handshake politely. Thank you for listening. Lucas smiled faintly. Listening is often more valuable than speaking. As he walked toward the waiting car, Nina reflected on how quickly a single moment could influence an entire environment. Inside Hudson Prime, service would continue. Guests would come and go. Meals would be served. But something fundamental had shifted. Because when fairness becomes visible, expectations change. And once expectations change, culture follows. By the following Monday, Hudson Prime had settled into a new rhythm. But the memory of that evening had not faded. Change, Nina understood, did not always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it revealed itself in the way people paused before speaking, in the way they reconsidered assumptions they had once believed were harmless. The dinner shift began as usual, yet the staff moved with greater intention. The small habits that once went unnoticed had begun to carry meaning. Water glasses were no longer filled mechanically but attentively. Guests were greeted with direct eye contact rather than rehearsed politeness. Even the tone of voices had softened, not with uncertainty, but with awareness. Margaret Collins continued her quiet observations, though she now intervened less often. The staff had begun correcting themselves. That evening, a reservation appeared on the schedule under a name Nina did not recognize. Mr. Howard Klein, party of 4, requested a quiet table. The name did not stand out, yet Margaret glanced at the list with subtle recognition. Mr. Klein has visited several of our locations, she said calmly. He values consistency. Nina nodded. Consistency had become the unspoken theme of the week. At precisely 7:10 p.m., a silver-haired man entered accompanied by 3 others, all appearing to be in their late 50s or early 60s. Their posture reflected confidence developed over decades of professional experience. They spoke quietly but carried the presence of individuals accustomed to being listened to. Nina approached promptly. "Good evening. Welcome to Hudson Prime." Howard Klein studied her expression carefully before offering a polite nod. "Good evening." His voice carried calm authority. "We have a reservation." "Yes, Mr. Klein, right this way." As she guided the group toward their table, one of the men glanced around the dining room with quiet observation. "Nice atmosphere," he said. "Thank you," Nina replied. "We try to make everyone comfortable." Howard noticed the phrasing. Everyone, not most, not preferred. Everyone. After the group was seated, Nina presented menus with the same attentiveness she offered every guest. "Can I start you with water, coffee, or perhaps iced tea?" "Coffee," Howard said. "Black." As she poured, he watched her carefully. "You seem very calm," he remarked. "I try to be consistent." "Consistency is rare," he said thoughtfully. "It takes practice," Nina replied. Throughout the meal, the group asked thoughtful questions about the menu, the sourcing of ingredients, and the preparation process. Nina answered each question clearly, without unnecessary embellishment. Experience had taught her that confidence often came from clarity rather than complexity. At one point, one of the men at the table gestured subtly toward another guest seated nearby, a man wearing a worn denim jacket. "That gentleman appears slightly out of place," he commented quietly. Nina followed his gaze briefly. "He is a guest," she answered simply. Howard allowed a faint smile. "That seems to be a recurring principle here." "It should be," Nina replied. Later in the evening, Lucas Romano entered quietly, choosing not to draw attention. He acknowledged Margaret briefly before observing the dining room. Margaret spoke softly. "That table," she said subtly, indicating Howard Klein. Lucas nodded once. Howard Klein was not simply a guest. He was an investor whose firm had supported the expansion of several hospitality groups across the country. He understood business culture intimately. He evaluated environments not only by revenue but by sustainability of reputation. Lucas remained near the entrance, observing. At Howard's table, conversation gradually shifted from menu selections to broader topics. "You've worked here long?" Howard asked Nina. 3 years. "And before that?" "Smaller restaurants, different neighborhoods." Howard nodded thoughtfully. "And what makes this place different?" Nina considered briefly. "People come here expecting quality. And do they receive it?" "I believe they receive what the staff chooses to give consistently." Howard exchanged a brief glance with one of his colleagues. Later, after dessert was served, Howard requested a brief moment of Nina's time. "I hope you don't mind a professional question," he said politely. "Of course. What do you believe is the most difficult part of hospitality?" Nina answered honestly, "Treating every guest with equal attention when others are watching to see who you prioritize." Howard nodded slowly. "That answer is more insightful than most operational reports." Across the room, Lucas observed quietly. Experience had taught him that culture could not be forced. It had to be demonstrated. After the bill was presented, Howard stood slowly. "I appreciate the consistency this evening," he said. "Thank you," Nina replied. As he prepared to leave, Howard turned slightly. "Businesses often spend millions trying to improve customer loyalty," he said thoughtfully. "Sometimes the answer is simply making sure no one feels invisible." Nina nodded. "I agree." Howard extended his hand politely. "You have a rare professional instinct." "Thank you." After he left, Lucas approached Margaret. "Well?" he asked. Margaret allowed a small approving expression. He noticed. Lucas nodded. "That matters." Later that evening, Lucas spoke briefly with Nina. "You made an impression tonight," he said. "I did my job. You did more than that." Nina remained composed. People remember how they are treated when no one believes they are important. Lucas considered her words carefully. Long-term success depends on that understanding. The dining room gradually emptied as the evening concluded. Margaret gathered the staff for a brief closing reflection. "This week reminded us of something fundamental," she said calmly. "Hospitality is not performance. It is character practiced consistently." Several employees nodded quietly, because now they understood. Respect was not an adjustment made for certain guests. It was a standard applied to all guests. And standards, once understood, define the future of every organization willing to protect them. Thursday evening arrived with a steady rain that painted Manhattan's streets in reflections of amber streetlights and blurred headlights. Hudson Prime remained warm inside, its atmosphere steady, controlled, and quietly confident. Yet beneath the familiar rhythm of service, anticipation lingered. Change had begun to settle into the culture of the restaurant. But change always invited one final test. Nina sensed it the moment the doors opened and a group of 6 entered together without a reservation. They were loud before even reaching the host stand, their presence disrupting the measured calm that most guests expected when stepping inside Hudson Prime. Their leader, a broad-shouldered man in an expensive but overly casual designer jacket, scanned the room with impatience. "We'll take the best table you've got," he announced. The hostess hesitated politely. "I'm sorry, sir. Most of our tables are reserved this evening." The man sighed dramatically. "Do you know how much money we spend in places like this?" Several nearby guests glanced up briefly. Margaret, observing from a distance, did not intervene. Nina approached calmly. "Good evening," she said. "We will do our best to accommodate you." The man studied her briefly. "You're the one from last week," he said with recognition. "I work here, yes." He gave a short laugh. "I heard about that story. The biker incident." His friends chuckled. "Let's see how consistent this place really is," he continued. Nina remained composed. "We treat every guest with respect. That includes people who arrive without reservations?" he asked. "That includes everyone," Nina answered. The group was seated at a large table near the center of the dining room. Their tone remained louder than most guests preferred, but Nina maintained professional composure. One of the men leaned back in his chair and spoke deliberately loudly. "Make sure we get better service than the biker guy." A few nearby diners exchanged uncomfortable glances. Nina answered calmly, "You will receive the same level of service as every guest." The man smirked. "We'll see about that." As the evening progressed, the group's behavior became increasingly demanding. They requested multiple changes to menu items, questioned prices loudly, and interrupted service flow with unnecessary complaints. Their behavior was not openly inappropriate, but it challenged the patience of the staff. One server whispered quietly near the bar, "Maybe consistency has limits." Margaret heard the comment but allowed the situation to continue. At one point, the group's leader snapped his fingers to call Nina over. "This steak is not exactly medium," he said sharply. Nina examined the dish carefully. "I can have the kitchen prepare another immediately." "You should," he replied. As she reached for the plate, he added, "I assume the biker didn't complain this much." His friends laughed. Nina remained calm. "Every guest has the right to express concerns," she said evenly. The man leaned forward slightly. "You really believe everyone deserves equal treatment?" "Yes." He paused. "Even difficult guests?" Nina met his gaze calmly. "Especially difficult guests." Margaret exchanged a brief glance with Lucas, who had entered quietly moments earlier. Lucas remained near the entrance, observing carefully. The group's behavior continued to test patience, yet the staff remained composed. Service continued smoothly. No one raised their voice. No one allowed irritation to become visible. Finally, as dessert menus were presented, The leader of the group leaned back and studied Nina thoughtfully. "You're serious about this principle," he said. "Yes." "Why?" Nina answered honestly. "Because consistency means nothing if it disappears under pressure." The man nodded slowly. Lucas stepped forward then, approaching the table. "Good evening," he said calmly. The group immediately recognized him. "Mr. Romano," the leader said, surprised. Lucas nodded politely. "I understand you've been evaluating the service this evening." The man allowed a faint smile. "Professional curiosity." Lucas glanced briefly toward Nina. "And what is your conclusion?" The man looked around the dining room, observing the quiet professionalism of the staff. "Your culture is stabilizing." Lucas nodded. "Consistency is not measured on easy nights." "No," the man agreed. "It is measured when patience is tested." He stood and extended his hand toward Nina. "You handled the evening well." "Thank you." He turned toward Lucas. "You're building something sustainable." Lucas responded calmly. "I'm protecting something valuable." After the group departed, the atmosphere relaxed slightly. The tension that had quietly shaped the evening dissolved. Margaret approached Nina. "You understand what happened tonight?" "I believe so," Nina said. "Consistency was tested." "Yes." Margaret nodded. "And consistency held." Later, Lucas spoke quietly as the restaurant began closing procedures. "Culture is not proven when conditions are perfect," he said. "It is proven when behavior becomes difficult." Nina nodded. "My father used to say patience reveals discipline." Lucas smiled slightly. He would have been an excellent advisor. As the final guests left, Hudson Prime returned to stillness. Another test had passed, not because conflict had been avoided, but because values had remained consistent even when challenged. And consistency, once practiced under pressure, becomes identity. By the following week, Hudson Prime had fully absorbed the quiet transformation that had begun with a single moment of courage. The dining room looked exactly as it always had. Polished glassware reflecting soft amber light. Conversations flowing in measured tones. The subtle aroma of grilled steak, blending with oak and warm bread, yet something deeper had shifted. The staff no longer moved merely with technical precision. They moved with awareness. Each interaction carried intention. Margaret Collins had reduced her presence on the floor, confident that the foundation had stabilized. Lucas Romano no longer needed to appear in disguise. The experiment had already revealed what he needed to know. Still, he continued to visit without ceremony, not as an owner inspecting performance, but as a steward protecting culture. One quiet afternoon, Margaret invited Nina into the small office overlooking the dining room. The space was modest but carried the weight of decisions that shaped careers. "Nina," Margaret began calmly, "we've reviewed staff feedback, guest feedback, and operational performance over the past 10 days. Nina listened attentively. "You have influenced measurable improvements," Margaret continued. "Guest satisfaction scores have increased. Staff cooperation has improved. Most importantly, the tone of service has become more consistent." "I only tried to do my job properly," Nina said. Margaret nodded. "That is precisely the point. True leadership often begins with responsibility rather than authority." She slid a folder across the desk. Inside was a formal letter. Nina read quietly. "Assistant Service Supervisor, Training and Culture Development." The role included structured responsibilities, mentoring new employees, contributing to hospitality training modules, and assisting management in maintaining service consistency across shifts. Nina looked up. "I didn't ask for this." Margaret allowed a faint smile. "People rarely ask for responsibility when they understand its weight." "I don't want special treatment," Nina said. "This is not special treatment," Margaret replied. "It is recognition of reliability." Nina considered carefully. "My priority is still stability for my family." Margaret nodded. "This position offers greater stability." Later that evening, Lucas arrived as the dinner service began. He did not interrupt operations but waited until Nina had completed assisting at table before speaking. "Margaret informed me you received the proposal," he said. "Yes. And?" "I'm considering it seriously." Lucas studied her expression. "What concerns you?" "I don't want people to think I received this because of one incident." Lucas nodded slowly. "Promotions based on isolated events rarely succeed. This one is based on consistent behavior since then." Nina understood. Lucas continued. "A strong culture requires individuals willing to protect fairness even when no one is rewarding them." Nina allowed herself a small, thoughtful smile. My father believed consistency builds trust. Lucas responded quietly, and trust builds legacy. Throughout the evening, Nina observed her colleagues differently, not critically, but with new awareness. Leadership did not mean authority over others. It meant responsibility for maintaining the environment that allowed others to perform well. One new employee struggled slightly with a table's special dietary request. Nina stepped in gently, guiding without embarrassment. "We accommodate the guest's needs without drawing attention," she explained quietly. The employee nodded gratefully. At another table, a regular guest complimented the attentive service. "The atmosphere feels different lately," the guest remarked. "We are always improving," Nina answered politely. Later, as the dining room began to quiet, Margaret gathered the staff for a short reflection. "We often speak about excellence," she said calmly. "But excellence is not perfection. It is consistency, guided by values." Several employees nodded. Margaret continued, "We learned something important recently. Standards do not protect dignity. People protect dignity." Lucas observed silently from a distance. He had built many businesses, invested in numerous ventures, but he understood that long-term success depended less on financial strategy and more on cultural stability. After closing, Nina stepped outside briefly to take a breath of cool evening air. Manhattan's night traffic hummed steadily, the city never fully resting. Lucas joined her near the entrance. "You handled the past week with professionalism," he said. "I followed what I believed was right. That is often more difficult than following instructions." Nina looked toward the streetlights. "People notice fairness even when they don't comment on it." Lucas nodded. "They also remember unfairness longer than mistakes." Nina understood. "My father used to say reputation is built slowly but lost quickly." Lucas allowed a small smile. "He sounds like a wise man." He believed dignity should never depend on status. Lucas considered the thought carefully. Status often distracts people from what truly matters. Nina looked at him. "Why did you test your own restaurant?" Lucas answered honestly. "Because growth can slowly weaken values if no one protects them." "And now?" "Now I know who protects them." Nina did not respond immediately. Responsibility often arrives quietly. Lucas continued, "A strong business is not built on impressive buildings. It is built on consistent decisions made by people who understand accountability." Nina nodded. "I will accept the position." Lucas extended his hand politely. "Congratulations." She shook his hand. "Thank you." Inside Hudson Prime, the lights dimmed gradually as the final closing procedures were completed. Another chapter had quietly concluded, not with celebration, not with applause, but with clarity, because when fairness becomes habit rather than exception, integrity becomes structure. And structure, once strengthened, supports everything built upon it. Friday evening arrived with quiet significance, though no formal announcement marked the moment. Hudson Prime operated with the same precision it always had, yet those who worked within its walls sensed that something meaningful had settled into place. Change no longer felt new, it felt natural. Nina arrived early, as she had every day since beginning her position. Her routine had not changed, despite the new title. She reviewed reservations, greeted colleagues politely, and prepared the dining floor with the same careful attention that had defined her work from the beginning. Titles, she believed, did not create discipline. Habits did. Margaret observed discreetly from a distance, satisfied to see that responsibility had not altered Nina's demeanor. Some individuals changed once authority was introduced. Others revealed consistency. By 6:30 p.m., the dining room filled gradually with familiar guests, couples celebrating anniversaries, longtime patrons who preferred predictable quality over experimentation, professionals who appreciated an environment where conversation could take place without unnecessary noise. An older gentleman approached the host stand slowly, using a cane with measured confidence. "Good evening," Nina said warmly. "Good evening," he replied. "I requested a quiet table." "Of course, Mr. Bennett. Right this way." She remembered him from previous visits. He had dined at Hudson Prime with his late wife for nearly 20 years. Since her passing, he continued to visit once a month, often ordering the same meal they had shared together. After being seated, Mr. Bennett looked around the dining room thoughtfully. "This place feels steady," he said. "We try to maintain that," Nina replied. He nodded slowly. "Consistency becomes more valuable with age." Nina understood the statement carried more meaning than the words alone suggested. As the evening progressed, The staff worked with smooth coordination. New employees demonstrated confidence, supported by guidance rather than correction. Conversations between servers carried respect rather than tension. Even the kitchen communicated more efficiently, reducing delays and improving timing between courses. Lucas Romano entered quietly midway through the evening. He did not seek attention, nor did he disrupt the flow of service. He simply observed, as he had done many times before. Margaret joined him briefly near the entrance. "You see the difference," she said calmly. Lucas nodded. "Consistency is visible now." Margaret folded her hands. "People often assume culture is created through policy." Lucas replied quietly, "Policy creates structure. Behavior creates culture." Margaret allowed a small approving smile. At table 16, a middle-aged couple spoke with Nina about their son's upcoming college graduation. They appreciated the calm atmosphere and thoughtful service. At another table, a group of longtime business partners discussed retirement plans, their conversation filled with reflection rather than urgency. The dining room no longer felt divided by invisible assumptions. Guests were simply guests. As the evening slowed, Lucas approached Nina. "You seem comfortable in the new role," he said. "I'm learning," she replied. "Learning never ends." "That's reassuring," she said with a small smile. Lucas looked across the room. "When I first entered this industry," he said thoughtfully, "I believed success depended on strategy." "And now?" Nina asked. "Now I understand success depends on trust." Nina considered the statement carefully. "Trust takes time." "Yes," Lucas replied, "but losing it takes moments." A brief silence followed. Lucas continued, "You reminded people of something essential." "I reminded myself first," Nina said quietly. Lucas nodded. "That is always where influence begins." Later, Margaret gathered the team for a final reflection before closing. "We often think excellence is complicated," she said calmly, "but often excellence is simply consistency practiced with integrity." The staff listened attentively. "We do not control who walks through the door," Margaret continued. "We control how they are treated once they enter." Several employees nodded, because now they understood. Professional pride did not come from exclusivity. It came from fairness. As the final guests left, Nina assisted with closing preparations. Chairs were aligned carefully. Table settings were reset for the following day. Lights dimmed gradually. Mr. Bennett paused briefly near the entrance before leaving. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "places like this become part of people's lives." "We're honored to be part of those moments," Nina replied. He nodded. "My wife always said a good restaurant feels welcoming without asking questions." Nina smiled gently. "That sounds like wise advice." He tipped his hat slightly and stepped into the cool evening air. Lucas approached once more before leaving. "You have helped create something sustainable," he said. "I simply protected something simple," Nina replied. Lucas studied her expression. "Simple principles are often the strongest foundations." Nina nodded. "My father believed people remember how you make them feel long after they forget what you say." Lucas allowed a faint smile. He was right. As Lucas prepared to leave, he paused briefly. "One day someone else will learn from the example you set here." Nina did not respond immediately. Responsibility often extended further than visible results. Lucas stepped outside into the quiet Manhattan night. Inside Hudson Prime, the lights dimmed, but the culture remained steady. Because true standards do not rely on supervision, they rely on character. And character, once practiced consistently, becomes legacy. The lesson remains simple. Every guest is a guest, and dignity, once given equally, builds something stronger than reputation. It builds trust that lasts longer than any single moment. Hudson Prime would continue serving meals, but more importantly, it would continue serving respect. And respect, practiced consistently, never goes out of style. The story teaches that true dignity is not determined by appearance, status, or wealth, but by how we choose to treat one another when no advantage is at stake. Respect should never be selective, because fairness reveals character more clearly than power ever can. In a world where people are often judged too quickly, the courage to treat everyone with equal kindness becomes a quiet form of justice. The story reminds us that integrity is built through consistent choices, and that the strongest leaders are often those who protect dignity when no one is watching. This video is a work of fiction created with the assistance of artificial intelligence. All characters, events, and situations are not real, and do not represent any actual people or true stories. The content is intended for storytelling and emotional illustration only.